Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the Goodie Nation Podcast. You're joining us after our previous episodes where we talked about the experience and the aftermath of the Atlanta State of the Black Tech Ecosystem Summit. And we are moving into a conversation that is almost a continuation of that spirit. The what do we do now? The how do we lead and proceed in real time as we are collectively, as a society, trying to figure it out. And so I am joined by some very special guests, some that you know, some that you're going to meet for the first time. So we have, of course, Joey Womack in the building. And we are joined by Renay Loper, who is someone that I know, and y'all are about to know her. But Renay, I would love it if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, Casey, and hi, Joey. Grateful to be here with you all. And hello, audience. Grateful to meet you all. As Casey mentioned, my name is Renay Loper. I am a full-time faculty member, so clinical professor at Bard College in the MBA in Sustainability program, teaching 3 of the 4 courses in our organizational leadership vertical. So focused on personal leadership development, leading change in organizations, and becoming a sustainable organization. On top of that, I am our podcast host. So exciting to be on the other side of the table for the Goodie Nation podcast. And I do some thought leadership, speaking, writing, and a bunch of other things, as Casey so eloquently puts it, in a bunch of other places. Quite simply stated, I am here to drive change and to facilitate change for the health of communities in any way that I can. So excited to be here.
So this episode is all about leading through change. Joey, you as leader of Goodie Nation for the past 10 plus years, we're in a new territory in some ways, some familiar territory, but some of this is like new. And so I would love to start with you in gauging your perspective on navigating as a leader in this current climate around some of the initiatives that have swiftly, I mean, it's been, a month and a half, swiftly become a part of our everyday life already.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, right? So recently I got a chance to attend a workshop, one of our partners, as they talked about leadership. And this was, when I say recent, this was, to be clear, this was like in the late summer, early fall, right? And so without kind of going into too much of the details, there's this framework, not developed by them, but by organizational leaders in the past, around how to lead during various types of times, right? And so there are times when things are chaotic, times where things are complex, and so on and so forth. And so there's, depending on where you are in this matrix, right? As a leader, you have a playbook, essentially. And so where we are right now, I think we're in chaotic times. Like, we actually don't know what we don't know. There are so many decisions being made at the top levels of society here in the U.S. So fast. They're causing so many variables to change very rapidly. And so we don't even know what variables they are. We don't know how they're changing. And so I think as a leader during times like this, you just really want things to kind of, slow down. But as a leader, it's your responsibility to step up. And it's essentially crisis management, right? You make a statement, you rally the troops, so to speak, and then wait for things to kind of go into this complex time. So when things get a little bit more complex and stuff like that, that's when we start to experiment. So my philosophy right now is starting to experiment in a lot of different areas. I probably won't go into them right now, but experiment in a lot of different areas in order to figure out what's next, because the objective for me right now, from a leadership perspective, not only from Goodie Nation, but the larger kind of communities that I'm a part of, is to create a playbook. And once that playbook is created, then it's all about implementing that playbook so that things are essentially repeatable. We get the change that we seek, right? And so it can be frustrating, right? It can be frustrating. It's emotional. It's mostly draining. You're trying to to balance a lot of different things. You're balancing the health and so on and so forth of the team, of the larger community. You're balancing your own personal mentality and stuff like that. I can tactically go into how I do that. But then you're driving for change. So, I can go on and on about this, but I'll kick it over to Renay.
Yes, and I love how you mentioned like you're trying to write this playbook. What is the playbook as we're collecting all this real-time data? And so for you, Renay, as not only a leader and change maker, but also someone who's teaching folks how to lead and be change makers, what is your sort of personal and professional playbook? How are you sort of dealing with the chaotic times?
Great question. And Joey, I can't wait to hear some of your tips and tactics that I can learn from too. But before I share kind of how I approach surviving or remaining resilient in this time, I do want to come back to something that Joey started to speak about. It made me think of VUCA. And so kind of the VUCA times, being in an environment or times that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think we're transitioning, we're in that period, but we're also transitioning to, there's a corollary that's been created in response to VUCA to show the evolution of VUCA, because VUCA didn't necessarily do justice some of the times that we are experiencing now. And that corollary is BANI, BANI, and that's brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. And so I feel like that beautifully yet painfully states kind of where we are in these times. We are in brittle times. We're on unfamiliar terrain and shaky ground. The foundations of which we stand on are being challenged. And it's a little rocky and unknown, causing anxiety, right? So there's this feeling or this experience of anxiety and anxiousness that can be connected to fear. We're in fearful times. Things aren't as clean as they used to be. So we're in a non-linear path, right? So things aren't as known as they used to be. So we're in this non-linear experience and it doesn't make sense. So that's the incomprehensible. Nothing is making sense in the way that it used to. And so I like the way that Joey framed experimenting with different things to try to make sense and just maintain during this time. And so taking a page from that playbook, I guess I can say I'm experimenting too, because some of the things that I used to do don't work in this unknown time. But the first thing that I've done is pause. As Joey mentioned, slow down, try to drown out all of the noise. There's a lot of talk, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of information that's being shared that's causing different emotions. So really paying attention to myself first and understanding how I'm feeling, and then pausing to allow the noise to subside, and then kind of paying attention to what it is that I need in that moment. Is it rest? Is it family? Is it community? Is it more information or education to understand what's happening in that moment? Am I at capacity? Do I have the capacity to absorb that new information? And then move from there. As leaders, I know many of us go into solution mode right away. We want to fix things. We want to solve the problems, and we disregard ourselves and we go right into problem solving without understanding that we need to be sustained in order to solve the problems. We need to understand what the problem really is before trying to solve the problems. So there's a lot of steps that I believe need to be taken, that I need to take before going into that traditional way of action, that traditional move of getting things done. So that's a new learning, a new experiment for me, if you will.
And I love how you sort of mentioned that as a leader, the first thought is like go into solutions mode. I'm standing right now. I look up to both of you as leaders, and I know, especially like Joey, sometimes I'm just like, I don't know, I need to ask Joey. And I'm wondering, like, for you in these times, you mentioned that you have certain methods or strategies to, mentally kind of maintain as you are leading and navigating communities. Would you mind maybe sharing a few? It might be helpful for folks listening to just kind of be more aware, not only for themselves, but to know that the people who they're looking up to are also human.
No. So part of this goes back to the promise that we make to people in the Goodie Nation community, right? So the first promise is that we promise to make sure they set strong priorities and goals and hold them accountable to hitting those goals, right? And so just for make sure we're on the same page, because also this is about leadership. I believe that strong leaders always have a plan, right? They always have a plan. I'm not saying you got to write a dissertation for a business plan, but you always got a plan. Like the best leaders I've ever run into, particularly from an entrepreneurship perspective, they always knew their North Star metric and where they sat. Like you could wake those folks up at 3 a.m. in the morning, they could roll out of bed and tell you what their North Star metric was. And so we teach to that essentially at Goodie Nation. Now, part of that is always knowing that information and things of that nature is difficult, right? It can be difficult. It can be stressful. Again, I'm wearing the Outwork Yesterday hoodie of one of our mantras. And that sounds all well and good, but it can also be very draining emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, and stuff like that. And so another part of our promise to the members of the community is to make sure that we care about them on a human level. And how that plays out on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis in our programming is we ask, particularly the entrepreneurs, but we ask them to assess themselves in terms of their personal and professional morale on a scale of 1 to 5. And so we recognize, although there are in many cases highly linked, but there's a difference between how you feel personally and how you feel on a human level. Now, for many innovators, right? Many innovators, their personal life does affect their professional life, and their professional life does affect their personal life. Not saying that it is ideal, but it is the reality for not all, but I think many folks. And so this forces people to, and we do this every week, right? Typically every Sunday or Monday, we ask them to fill out a form and rate on a scale of 1 to 5. And so with 5 being the highest. And it forces people to take a second to recognize how they truly feel, right? Some people can say, oh, I'm a 5 personally, I'm a 5 professionally. And some people can say, I'm a 2 personally, like something happened, maybe I had a death in the family, maybe something happened with their house, they had a house issue, but professionally they can be feeling a 5. And it's okay to feel that way. Now, without kind of going into more detail, what I can say is that from a Goodie Nation perspective, we also kind of will reach out to people if they are consistently below a 3. But the point I'm bringing up here is, as a leader, taking a few minutes, maybe it's a Sunday night, maybe it's a Monday morning, to essentially look back at yourself can do tons for your mental health, because you at least have the awareness about where you sit, and then you can do something about it. Even if doing something about it means literally you're doing nothing but sitting on the couch, and that's totally okay too.
Yeah. And I like how you brought up the Outwork Yesterday mantra, one of many mantras in the Goodie Nation sphere. And a big one for 2025 is imagine that. The notion of imagining the future that we want to see for the innovation economy. And so in a similar vein, it could be, I guess, imagining or just thinking about the evolution of the work that you do. Renay, I would love to know, as we're in these times, we're sitting with them, we're coming up with strategies to, be able to maintain professionally, personally. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to, or in terms of how you see your work evolving? Are there imagine that moments where you're like, you know what? I would like to look beyond this, and this is what I want my work to look like?
Ooh, that is a great question. And while I'm thinking of my response, I think I need an Outwork Yesterday sweatshirt, because I like that. I need that reminder. So, You know what, Casey? I think the first thing that comes to my mind, and I deeply believe it, and I was trying to think of something else to say, but I wish that I did not have the role that I had. And so I think imagine that would be, imagine a world where we didn't have to have conversations, taking it to, again, my work is in the business of leadership. And in leadership, we focus on the people, taking care of self, taking care of community. If you get those two pieces in order, then you can focus on systems and problems and that kind of thing. And so imagine if we didn't have to spend so much time encouraging leaders to spend time with themselves, because that's what we do. Dare I say self-care? Don't want to, that word has been overused. So I'm not talking about, spa days and that kind of thing, but just honoring our humanity. The way that Joey said, if you need to sit down on the couch and just decompress and watch TV, that's okay in that moment. We're taught that our value is tied to productivity. And so there's so much unlearning that leaders have to go through in order to take care of themselves. So wish I didn't have to spend time during that. I think about in solving complex problems and the work of bringing folks together. A lot of times the challenge is just having people with differences being able to speak to each other, in this day and age, especially with the infiltration, if you will, of technology. We've forgotten how to talk to each other, how to have social dialogue, simple dialogue, how to communicate verbally, how to send coherent messages and emails, things like that. It sounds trivial, but it is a lost art, communicating with each other, socializing, being in community, being in relationship with each other. I think would be a mitigator to some of the problems that we face, and a solution to a lot of the problems that we face. And so I wish we didn't have to spend so much time on core human principles, I believe core human principles, in order to progress, in order to move forward. I don't see this going away anytime soon. I think if anything, it's going to grow and challenge. And I think the need for folks to have to understand and know how to communicate across differences, work across differences toward solving problems is only going to grow. And I think the ways and the tactics that we use are also only going to have to grow in sophistication, because the times are different.
Yeah. And I love you bring up about community building and talking to one another. I mean, that's essentially what this is. We talk a lot about the different ways that we're bridging the relationship gap at Goodie Nation. And so it could be something really small. It could be sending a text message. It could be sending an email. It could be meeting for, something in person and actually having a face-to-face conversation. And those small gestures could potentially be that thing that, leader to leader, somebody just needed to vent and now they feel better and can go back to doing their work. And so to kind of wrap us up, I would love for both of you, if you could briefly share one of the most important leadership lessons that you have learned over the course of, it could be your whole career, it could be, again, in this month and a half of whatever's happening, just to kind of take us home. And I'll start with you, Joey.
Cool. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I could say, right? One of the things that immediately comes to mind for me though is more so something recent. And it's really, I'm gonna combine two different things in one response. So as what was alluded to, in January of this year, we were hosting the 2025 State of the Atlanta Black Tech Ecosystem Summit, right? So it was scheduled for January 11th, Saturday, January 11th in Atlanta, Georgia. And there's a lot of hype. So at that point, like I say, like a few days out, roughly 1,000 people had registered for the event. It's going to be an amazing experience. And people were really on let's say on pins and needles, but people were really looking for some leadership. And so going into it, I had a message of, they're out to get us, right? They're out to get us, and we got to come up with this plan to move forward, right? We got to come up with this plan to move forward. And then the snow happened, the first snow in Atlanta, and we postponed it to January 22nd. right? And that is 2 days after the inauguration. There was a lot of things happen between Monday, January 20th and Wednesday, January 22nd, including another snow in Atlanta, which is unheard of. So twice in a month it snows in Atlanta, and we have to postpone again. And so at this point, I'm like, all right, a lot of stuff has happened in society. People are even on more pins and needles, and they're looking for a message. And I was going to come in very fiery. We got to do this and we got to do that. And the reality for me is a lot of stuff, I had a very negative mindset, right? I had taken the facts that were happening and assigned a lot of negativity to it. But the day before that session, we had a workshop with a founder in our community. His name is Harry Wilson, and his company is called Limitless Minds. And what they do is they take former athletes and elite sports franchise coaches. So, for example, the coach of like the mental health coach for like Chicago Cubs and New York Mets, and track and field coaches for the U.S. men's and women's track team and stuff like that, again, on the mental health side of things. And they pair them with corporations for coaching, right, on mental fitness. And so he led a workshop, and the whole concept around their organization is built on this concept of neutral thinking, right? And so it's not necessarily about being positive. So taking a step back, his last name is Wilson. He is the brother of Russell Wilson, the quarterback currently the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is known to be pretty positive. And what Harry says is that Russell's not necessarily positive. He's just not negative. He's very intentional about not being negative. And so his thing is to be that way, you just focus on facts. You focus on facts and don't assign any negativity to them. And so I heard that the day before the summit that we moved online, and I took that to the community. And my message was, I know there's a lot of things that are happening in the U.S. right now, but let's focus on the facts and not assign negativity to them so that we can move forward, right? So the first part about that is, the first kind of leadership lesson is to be neutral in your thinking to the best of your ability. And it can be difficult. So you got to train yourself to do it. Just like an athlete trains physically, you got to train your mind to be neutral. The second piece, and I'll kind of end here relatively quickly, is this concept of polarity, going back to one of our partners' workshops. And so for many leaders, there's a lot of times pressure to be either or in your thinking. If you're an entrepreneur, should I go fast or should I build for quality, right? The recent thing in the tech space over the past few months, should I be in founder mode, meaning you're very close to the team, or should I be in manager mode and let my team do what they do, right? So these are either or scenarios, and that's typically what a lot of leaders find themselves in terms of the way they think. But the concept of polarity is both and. So there are times when you can be in manager mode, and there are times when you should be in founder mode. There's time where you should build for speed. There's time you should build for quality and things of that nature, right? And so there's a whole framework behind that I encourage everyone to look into, right? And so if you take you take both these concepts together of the first one of polarity, like in terms of like the times that we're in right now, there are times that we should be very hands-on. There are times where we should be a little bit hands-off. There are times where we should be out front and be very vocal about what we want. There are times where we should be more stealth mode, right? But at the end of the day, in all situations, we should remain neutral in our thinking. So that's all I got.
There it is. Focus on the facts. Renay, I would love for you to close this out. What are some of the most important leadership lessons that you are carrying with you into these times?
Can I just say snap, snap, snap to Joey? Everything, everything that Joey just shared, spot on. Love the inclusion of polarities. That's something that we speak about, in the classes that I teach. And it's so true. And it's so something that's underknown, underrepresented. Leaders don't understand that. And I guess it's not a part of traditional training, but it's so true. To everything, there is a time. And I think about even in this moment, folks are asking me, Renay, what should we be doing? What can I do? I want to do more. I want to say more. I don't know what to do. And I usually say, well, what's true to you? Some folks feel like they need to be the activist if they're not an activist. And so it's unnatural, it's inauthentic. And I say, well, what's true for you? Because when we're talking about this, the challenges that we're facing as a nation now, or any complex social challenges, environmental, economic, anything that we're talking about requires a complex solution, a holistic solution. So it's not that everyone needs to be doing the same thing. There's room for everyone to do whatever they can. And I would say that probably is one of my leadership lessons, is there's room for everyone to do anything that they can in the way that's authentic to them toward solving the problem, solving for X, or advancing the solution, to put it in the positive way. And connected to that, the second piece I would say is leaders lead from where they are. Folks often look to a person or to a role or to a title for direction or for guidance. Leaders lead from exactly where they are. Leaders have qualities that bring things, uncover solutions, uncover information to share with other people, to bring other people along toward a certain direction. So I encourage everyone to examine what leadership means to them. What are they seeking in leaders or from leadership? And then what do they have in themselves? What are they responsible for in themselves? What can they do in themselves as the leaders that they already are? Leaders of family, leaders of community, leaders of friends, family, peer, colleagues, leaders of organizations, leaders of systems, leaders of networks. It's so dynamic that, to the point of binary, I encourage us not to get stuck in what we believe a leader should look like or should do, or how a leader should show up, when it's all of our responsibility. If you touch something, I believe you have a responsibility to it. And I would say the other piece to that is, if we are looking at leadership as a role or a title, if you are the one that folks are asking you what to do or expecting you to make decisions, is to surround yourself with a community of people that can restore you, refuel you, allow you to be raw, allow you to not have the answers, and not judge you, and also hold that mirror up to you and help you be honest with yourself. I think that's something that often goes unrecognized, is just the necessity for leaders to have people around them who are with them, but not expecting anything of them. And it also can help them to be honest to themselves in the work that they do.
I want to jump in. So it's my time to do the finger snaps, and I love that around leading from where you are, right? If I could just give a quick example, I was talking with a board member last week, and she was saying, like, Joey, one of the reasons why you're great, people follow you, is because you don't necessarily seek the spotlight and stuff like that, which may or may not be true. It probably is to a certain extent, right? But interesting. Like, I was talking to my mom today, and she may end up watching this. She may end up watching this podcast, listening to it. But she was saying in her work that she doesn't want to be out front, right? I'm a child, right? But I am a lot like her. And she's always the type of person, she basically just wants to be an operator behind the scenes. She is not comfortable being out front, right? So the reason I bring this story up is, if you're taking Renay's excellent advice about leading from where you are, look to your past. Look to in many cases, the people that raised you or genetically linked to you, because they will give you an example about being a leader. You don't have to lead, a 1,000-person organization or 100-person team. Leadership takes its form throughout your entire life, including by the very people that raised you. For most of us, not everyone doesn't have that privilege. I want to recognize that. For a lot of people, the people that raised you, literally that model of leadership was there for you. And look at how they led during difficult times, during complex times and even through good times and stuff like that, and copy that and then kind of apply it to your current situation.
And if I could, I would even probably ask or add, Joey, I bet your mom is an influencer from behind the scenes. I bet she probably influences in her own way, on a scale, but probably galvanizes people. And so that is a form of leadership. When you're influencing, that's probably a bit one of the more unsung, powerful forms of leadership is the power behind, right? The people. So tell mom, hi mom, if you're listening, tell mom that she's definitely a leader.
I will.
Well, we love moms on this show. And I think that this conversation, it started off of like two leaders talking about leadership stuff. And in the end, it's making us all feel like, oh, maybe I too could, in whatever way I can, lead something, lead in my own way. And I think that's probably the sign of good leaders. So y'all did it. Thank you both.
Keep going.
You did it. Thank you both so much for this incredible conversation. I'm sure that the folks listening are going to take a piece of something away. And for everyone who is going through all the things with us, you have community, you have folks to lean on, you have ways to reach out and connect, and we are here. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Goodie Nation podcast. I would love for you to check out another very special conversation on the Lead the Change podcast that Renay hosts as part of Bard College's graduate sustainability programs, and we'll have that info for you. And with that, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Peace out, y'all.